Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. It is very, very exciting to be here in person. And to those of us that are online, thank you for joining as well. We are excited to be here because today we are talking once again, and as always, about advocating for justice from the border to Chicago to DC, and of course, all of those spaces in between, right? A couple of housekeeping rules. We don't have rules. We have a couple of housekeeping guidelines. Housekeeping guidelines is we are recording this presentation and it will be posted online soon after today. We are not offering CLEs. Sorry. Bathrooms for those of us that are in person, and if you're not from NIJC, bathrooms are just right down the hall. For those of us that are online, feel free to leave some comments in the comments or drop your questions in the Q&A. We will have Q&A section at the end of the presentation. And how rude am I? I didn't even introduce myself and I just start talking at y'all. My name is Ellen Miller. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the pro bono manager at NIJC. So very nice to see all of you in person. And again, for you online, excited to engage with you. If you're new to NIJC, I'd like to just give a brief overview of who we are and what we do. So NIJC, the National Immigrant Justice Center, is part of the Heartland Alliance, and our mission is to ensure human rights protections and a just asylum system, or a just system, immigration system, excuse me, for asylum seekers, immigrants, and refugees. With a staff, a wonderful staff of about 135, we have offices here in Chicago, because that's where we're at today, 2 in Indiana, San Diego, and DC. We're excited because we have 2 colleagues from our DC office with us here in the Chicago today. NIJC, our service model, we have an integral service model that combines direct legal services, policy, public education, and federal impact litigation. And we do this all so that we can advocate for individual clients and for broad-based systemic change. So today's topic, now that you know what we do and how we do it, who we do it with, today's topic, we're focusing on asylum, okay? So Jessie Francois is our wonderful colleague that's normally in DC and has left some of that humidity to come to the tornadoes of Chicago, and will be talking to us about upholding the right to seek asylum. Richard Calderon is our colleague who is online, joining virtually today, and he's going to be talking about the litigation and challenging the asylum ban. Lucian Rodriguez is a member of our asylum team here in Chicago and leading our response for the arriving asylum seekers in Chicago. And Naina Gupta, our associate director, who's also generally in DC, but joining us today, will talk about the campaign Chance to Come Home. During this segment, we have a very powerful video that we're going to be showing that we're really excited to share with everybody. I'm going to wrap up the presentation with a few ways to get involved, because you'll hear lots of information. And of course, you'll be inspired to go out and keep doing what you've already been doing and new ways to do it. Of course, this presentation does not happen without our wonderful communications team. So we have Julia Topher on the line, who is keeping us connected and well-informed, and the lovely Nadia Khwaja, who helped with the cookies and getting us in the door and is setting up all the tech. So it really always takes a village, and we're excited for the team we have. And I mentioned we will have Q&A at the end, okay? So I'm gonna sit down again and turn it over to Jessie. Have fun.
So much, Ellen, and yeah, thanks Nadia and Julia and everyone just putting this together. So yeah, I'm Jessie Francois, he, him pronouns, with our DC policy team, and super excited to be in the Chicago office. So happy we're able to come. So I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the work that our policy team does to advocate on behalf of asylum seekers, some of our legislative affairs work, advocating for a just and humane immigration system, and to bring the context a little bit, I'll probably start mostly with what's happened just since the start of the Biden administration and more recently. So just earlier this year, the Biden administration launched a suite of new enforcement programs that severely restricted access to asylum and harming refugees and asylum seekers seeking to enter at the southern border. These measures include expanding Title 42 expulsion policy at that time, and also increasing rapid deportations through the expedited removal process, and then they paired it with a narrow role program at that time. And one of the most extreme measures that they implemented was the asylum ban rule that was published in February of this year, and that makes refugees arriving at the southern border ineligible for asylum if they didn't seek asylum in another transit country, and if they didn't get an appointment through a very problematic phone-based app. And Richard's going to speak a lot more about that and the litigation around that, the asylum ban rule. And so before Title 42 ended, NIJC, our policy team, really jumped into action, educating members of Congress and advocating for offices to oppose the ban and support humane and rational solutions for when the Title 42 expulsion policy was going to be set to end. These are just some pictures of individuals coming to DC that we took around to members of Congress to meet with our staff and advocate for them, for these congressional offices to really push the administration to seek just and humane solutions and policies and programs. And so on the next slide, so what are the justifications that the administration has given for enacting a lot of increasingly punitive programs? It relies on this false assumption that deadly enforcement measures have been successful in deterring irregular migration. And so we've done a lot of work to counter this presumption. And part of this involves using the Freedom of Information Act and doing litigation with the litigation team to get internal records publicized that show that unearth these type of programs that are in operation. And these records relate to this consequence delivery program, which is a suite of different enforcement measures that the administration has used. That includes expedited removal, which we've seen a really large increase in. It also includes the use of immigration-related prosecutions, so sending people to criminal prosecutions when they try to enter, if they enter outside of a port of entry at the southern border. And so we did a lot of work educating congressional offices and doing public education. And part of that involved getting these internal records exposed through litigation using the Freedom of Information Act. And the next slide, we also do a lot of work filing administrative complaints on behalf of people who are in immigration detention. And so, the number of people in immigration detention has actually doubled since the Biden administration came into office. So it was around 14,000 people in January of 2021, and now it's around 30,000 people, and it's increasingly including people who are seeking asylum, who are held in immigration detention while they are going through their process. And so we do a lot of work supporting the legal teams at NIJC to support efforts to request to demand the release of people who are in immigration detention. And part of that involves filing complaints with administrative offices, such as the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, and filing complaints to document abuses that are taking place, patterns of abuse that are taking place in immigration detention, and then using it to advocate on behalf of individuals, NIJC clients, to escalate their cases, bring it to members of Congress, to really push ICE to release people, to secure their freedom. And on the next slide, another piece of work that we do a lot is advocating for due process rights for individuals. And part of this involves documenting cases of where data that is originating from foreign sources. So we've been doing a lot of work to document how the Department of Homeland Security has programs where they gather information from foreign governments, from foreign police forces, foreign security forces, and they hold this information that when people arrive to the US-Mexico border, or people who are already in the US, who've been here a long time, their immigration cases can often be harmed because of this information sharing type of programs. And often this leads to people's their release requests from detention being denied, and it often leads to people's asylum claims being denied because they are accused of something in their home country. And so we've done a lot of work to document these programs expose these programs and advocate for restrictions on these programs and advocate for a process by which individuals can refute these allegations, because they're often based on very erroneous allegations. They're often based on charges that are coming from countries, repressive security forces, or countries that they're fleeing. That's often part of their part of their asylum claim that they are fleeing in the first place, and then so it's this kind of cycle of punishment that they're caught into. So we've done a lot of work to document this. And on the next slide, so after the asylum ban was announced, and again, Richard is going to speak a lot more about the asylum ban. We were doing a lot of work to build congressional opposition to this asylum ban, to this restrictive rule. We raised awareness on the impact that this asylum ban would have, worked with congressional offices to develop comments opposing this, and did a lot of education. And these are some pictures, actually, Mary Meg McCarthy, NIJC's executive director, and Heidi Altman, our policy team director, who went to the border. And one of these pictures is actually Heidi speaking to individuals. And this was right as the Title 42 expulsion program is ending. And, there are many people waiting to try to get more information, to try to understand what process they need to undergo in order to try to enter at that time. And so NIJC joined a delegation to the border at that time to document what was going on and report back. And this is a title of a report that they released, that we released with other organizations shortly after. And the next slide is so lastly, another really big effort that we engage in on the policy team is on the congressional appropriations process. So every year when members of Congress appropriate a certain amount of money towards the Department of Homeland Security, there's a lot of advocacy that goes into shaping what the funding looks like, shaping different proposals and different recommendations in those pieces of legislation. And one of the big things that we've advocated for is the shelter and service program, which is a program that provides support to NGOs doing work, welcoming migrants. There are NGOs in Chicago that receive this funding to help support arriving migrants, and of course NGOs along the border that receive this funding to help with shelter and services and transportation of people who are arriving. So there was around 800 million that was allocated for the last fiscal year, and around 300 million, I think, has been allocated so far this year. This is actually a really important program, but has also been a target for some members of Congress who want to do away with this program. So we're advocating very strongly to make sure this program stays in order to have this funding continue for these shelter and support services. And also on arriving migrants, which of course Luciana is going to talk a lot more about the efforts in Chicago. We've done some work in DC as well, as there's been a lot more arriving migrants in DC. We've done some work supporting local organizations who are advocating for local legislative efforts to make sure that the services that they're providing, that the city is providing, are inclusive and not exclusive. So we provided testimony during a DC City Council hearing last year as this legislation at the city level was moving forward to support arriving migrants. And so we've done some work there. And now I believe Richard will speak about the asylum ban and the litigation that's underway there.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Can everyone who's in the conference room hear me?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm Richard Calderoni. I'm one of the senior litigation attorneys on our federal litigation team. And as Jesse mentioned, I wanted to talk a little bit about the new asylum ban and our cases challenging it. And if we can go ahead to the next slide. The ban is not entirely new. It's the latest in a series of policies that have been implemented in efforts to restrict asylum at the southwest border, the US-Mexico border. Back in 2016, the Department of Homeland Security began a practice known as metering, which is essentially forcing people onto wait lists in Mexico to enter at US ports of entry to seek asylum, and only taking a certain number of people each day at each port. Then in 2018, DHS and the Department of Justice enacted something that we call the entry ban, which basically was an attempt to say, to get asylum in the United States, you have to enter at a port of entry. If you enter between them by, say, crossing the Rio Grande or coming through the desert, you're not eligible for asylum. NIJC and other organizations challenged that rule, and it was struck down by federal court on various grounds, including that Congress has pretty clearly said that anyone in the United States who's a non-citizen can apply for asylum no matter how they entered the country. With that gone, DHS and DOJ enacted something we call the transit ban, which basically said that you're eligible for asylum in the United States only if you applied for and were denied asylum in some other country through which you passed on the way to the US. And this was hugely problematic because most people who approach through the country via the southwest border are not going to be safe in countries like Mexico or the countries in Northern Central America. Again, NIJC and some other organizations challenged this rule, and it was struck down in both the federal court in San Francisco and the federal court here in DC. Unfortunately, it was in effect for about a year, and we saw during that year that almost no one was allowed to apply for asylum after being subject to the ban. Then in 2020, with COVID-19's arrival, a policy called Title 42 was put in place, which basically closed the border to anybody seeking asylum on purported public health grounds. That finally was lifted this year on May the 11th. But DHS and DOJ promulgated this new asylum ban and it took effect the very moment that Title 42 ended. And the ban is essentially a combination of the prior entry and transit bans. Its terms are a little bit complicated, but it basically boils down to, if you're not Mexican and you're not an unaccompanied child, and you enter at the US-Mexico border, the only way to be eligible for asylum is to enter at a port of entry after making an appointment through a smartphone app called CBP-1. There are a couple of very narrow exceptions to this, and one of them essentially repeats the transit ban. Basically, if you've been denied asylum, applied for and been denied asylum in Mexico or another country through which you passed, then you don't have to have a CBP-1 appointment, theoretically. But the various exceptions will apply to almost no one. And so it generally boils down to a requirement that you enter the country in a particular way. And as Jesse mentioned, the smartphone app CBP-1 is hugely problematic for a variety of reasons. One of them is that the number of appointments that CBP makes available is completely insufficient, given how many people have been waiting at the US-Mexico border for weeks, months, and years. Those appointments are distributed by lottery. And so you can only apply for them from northern or central Mexico. And so once people get to those parts of Mexico, they often have to wait for weeks or months to be able to secure an appointment, usually in quite dangerous conditions. Further, the app is only available in English, English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole, although there are parts of it that are not available in Haitian Creole, but are available in French. And so if you happen to speak an indigenous language from Central America, or an African language, or you're from Brazil and you speak Portuguese, or you speak Spanish or English but are not highly literate, there's really no way for you to use the app. It's also very buggy with all of the error messages in English, and it uses facial recognition software that, like much facial recognition software, is extremely difficult to use for people with darker skin. And so this has really throttled access to asylum at the US-Mexico border. And so NIJC, along with the ACLU and the Center for Gender and Refugee Studies, has filed a suit in the federal court in San Francisco, the same court that struck down both of the prior bans, asking the court to strike down this ban on essentially the same grounds and for other reasons. We have a major hearing in that case next week on the 19th, and I hope we'll have a decision from the court soon after that. But this is not actually our only challenge to the ban. There's a process called expedited removal, under which people who arrive in the country without a valid visa or other entry documentation can be immediately sent back to their home countries without any process at all, unless they indicate a fear of returning to their home country. If they do that, they're given something called the credible fear interview, which Congress intended to be a very, very low screening mechanism that essentially asks, do you have a colorable asylum claim? And if the answer is yes, DHS is supposed to put people in removal proceedings in immigration court, which gives them the chance to file a full asylum application. This new bar is the first bar on asylum of any kind that has ever applied in the credible fear context, which means that a lot of people with reasonably strong asylum claims are now getting screened out of asylum in the expedited removal process. And although they remain eligible to apply for more restricted types of relief, DHS in this role has also raised the evidentiary standard for passing the credible fear interview as to those kinds of relief. And so what we've seen over the 2 months that the ban is in effect is that the quote unquote passage rate for credible fear interviews, the number of people who have been put in removal proceedings and allowed to apply for asylum or other relief versus those who are immediately sent back to their home country has declined by about 40%. It's really a significant, remarkable decline. And to challenge, Congress has said that to challenge credible fear policies, you have to file suit in the federal court in the District of Columbia. So we have a second suit that's proceeding there. This one is on behalf of 18 people who came to the US to seek asylum and to whom the bar was applied during expedited removal, and also 2 organizations that serve people in the expedited removal process. And that case is on a little bit of a slower timeline, but we remain hopeful that one or both of these cases will result in this ban being invalidated, just as the prior 2 bans were being invalidated. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lysiane to talk about welcoming arriving asylum seekers in Chicago.
Thank you, Richard. So yeah, I'm Lysiane Rodriguez. I'm a senior attorney in the Asylum Project here in Chicago, and I am leading the project that is responding to new arrivals and recent arrivals here in Chicago. And I'm going to touch base a little bit about direct legal services. I think it's really incredible that we have kind of this 3-pronged work that's happening at NIJC that's really rare. And so thank you to all of you. So in our asylum project and in other projects here in Chicago and Indiana, we have been helping asylum seekers for long before this influx, but we have had to adapt and adjust to the changes because since August 31st, 2022, we've received more than 11,000 new arrivals. And that's consistently increasing. The bulk of those new arrivals coming via bus from Texas and are being dropped off here with no connection to family or anything here in Chicago. And then we're also, this city has reported that we're also receiving around 50 new arrivals per day from a different mode of transportation, right? 25 buses have arrived since May 9th. And basically the state and the city have invested in coordinating initial triage of services and resources for recent arrivals. And that includes legal services. However, some orgs are being funded by the city, some orgs are being funded by the state. We fall under city funding, and we are currently still waiting for that funding. And I think this is a great time to point out the importance of funders and the importance of having access to unrestricted funds that allow us to act quickly to these needs, where a lot of orgs are going to have to wait to be able to get those fundings, and a lot of people are going to become ineligible for asylum quickly. We are able to act, and it's been a really exciting project, and I'm excited to tell you about it. Currently, there are 13 city-operated shelters, and many people who were already decompressed from shelters but have stayed here in Chicago. Many people who have relocated to different parts of the country, and we are in constant communication with both the city and the state about those numbers and about those immediate needs. And as I mentioned, our initial response to this influx is that we are creating around this program pro se workshops for recent arrivals. We understand that the quantity of immigrants is always going to be way too much for all of us to be able to provide direct legal rep. It was long before this influx, right? And so we have had to be really creative about how do we impact as many people as possible. And the way that we have decided to do that has been kind of modeling other workshops that we've done already at NIJC, partnering with pro bono partners and pro bono attorneys who are really, really eager to do this work and really excited. And we're very grateful for, along with our community partners who help us outline who will be eligible for the workshops. Our first workshop is next week, Wednesday, July 19th. We are really excited to just get this off the ground, get it running, especially as people in August and September are reaching their one-year deadlines. And obviously we had a big influx this spring, but we have, this has been happening for about a year now, right? So it's continuous work. So here I want to touch base a little bit about the reach of NIJC through this specific new process. So NIJC resources reach new arriving immigrants long before they even come to have actual contact with us, because NIJC has created such incredible tools and resources and know your rights, videos and pro se change of venue resources long before that they even get to touch base with us. And so I think sometimes when we're in the direct legal rep in the every single day, it's kind of hard to see big picture. So it's really awesome to know that NIJC reaches people even if we don't get to represent them. And then with community partners, we are outlining who is eligible for our workshops. Really prioritizing, like I said, those one-year deadlines and helping people fill out that link, that form. And I want to also shout out our data and systems management team who helped us create that form. It's like magic. And so then our project coordinator will help contact potential participants, and we'll coordinate with firms that will host us for a day to get asylum applications filled out, and to give them guidance on what's next after you file your asylum application. And so we also give resources to those who don't qualify for our workshops. We have already been doing a lot of new arrivals work through our immigration court hotline, and I just want to shout them out that they have been swamped and have done incredible work with new arrivals. And so we're hoping that with these programs and with more funding, we can continue to create capacity to do more of this work. And yeah. And so just to touch on some community needs, like I said, there's one-year deadlines that are coming up. Obviously, with all the buses coming in the spring, it's very like a new and flashy topic, right? But there are people coming up on 1-year deadlines, you know, today, tomorrow. And so that's our main concern and main priority right now. We also, you know, want to extend the ask for, you know, federal advocacy and funding, extended parole, and more funding for cities that have received so many arrivals, because this isn't happening everywhere, right? This is very localized places in the US, and the city and the state are doing great, but I do think that it falls on the federal government to also do more, expediting processing times for EATs, and the federal government's ability to designate and redesignate TPS. We think would all really help all recent arrivals, and especially this influx now. So yeah, I'll pass it on over.
Hi, everyone. I'm Naina. I'm the Associate Director of Policy at NIJC. Like Jesse, I'm in Washington, D.C., advocating on Capitol Hill for our NIJC clients and communities. And something that I have loved about being at NIJC is, as Ellen mentioned, we can take an integrated advocacy approach to the work we do. We can use a range of tools and strategies across our teams to have impact for our clients. And also, you know, in addition to the defensive work that we're doing right now, you know, to save our asylum system and protect the right to asylum, we can also make affirmative asks for our communities, in particular for immigrants who've lived here for many years, but who are still up against a punitive, outdated, harsh enforcement system. And so a perfect example of this is Chance to Come Home, which is a campaign that calls on the Biden administration to set up a central process to allow unjustly deported people to make a case to return to the US and reunite with their loved ones. We're making that call alongside these 10 exceptional deported advocates who are living in exile, fighting themselves to come back, and they are bravely and courageously sharing their stories and experiences as we make this call. They represent the thousands of people who've been deported and separated from decades of life. So they represent US military veterans, mothers, fathers, community leaders, you know, DACA recipients, a whole range of folks are in this group of unjustly deported people. The ask at the heart of our campaign is embodied in a 2021 white paper that we released, where we, give the Biden administration a roadmap on how they can use existing laws and procedures to set up a process like this. The paper also tells the story of 11 unjustly deported people, and we've been able, alongside many of our partners, to bring back 6 of those folks. We've also had some small but important policy wins with this proposal. And then next slide, very excitingly, we launched about a month ago. We had over 600 people register to watch our launch, and we have growing congressional support. So we have over 64 members of Congress, champions in Senator Booker, Senator Padilla, who are making this call to action. We've garnered national press and attention, thanks mostly and largely to these 10 people leading our campaign. But to really understand the power of Chance to Come Home, what I'm excited to share with all of you is a film that NIJC co-produced with an award-winning filmmaker that tells the story of 2 deported people, Howard and Vanessa, who have been fighting for a chance to come home. So I think with that, we'll hit play.
My name is Howard Bailey.
My name is Vanessa Vaquis Mendoza.
I was originally from Jamaica. I was 15 years old when I came to New York.
I was born in El Salvador, and I left when I was 9 years old to the United States.
I signed up for the military. I got married. I started a family. And I started my trucking business. Things finally was looking up.
When I was 16, I got pregnant. My oldest son, Jason, he had Pompe disease, rare disease, didn't have no cure.
Get out there, Jason!
He used to be like, Mom, stop screaming so much because you embarrass me.
In 1995, I just got out of the military then, fresh, not even 6 months. And I get arrested for marijuana. My lawyer told me I had to plead guilty because it's Virginia Beach, I'm black, and I'm Jamaican. I didn't think that in 2010 that the marijuana conviction that happened 14 years ago would have came back and haunt me. About 5:30 in the morning, I heard a big knock on the door. Boom, 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 boom. And I opened the door. And then it was like, Howard Bailey? I was like, yes, sir, that's me. Did you apply for citizenship like 6 months ago? I'm like, yeah. And it was like, turn around, that's why we're here. I'm like, what? And they just grabbed me, man. And they just put the cuffs on me. And I was like, what's going on? It was like, yeah, you're getting deported. And my daughter came down and saw me in the handcuffs. She was crying and screaming and asking why they taking him. My daughter lost me. My wife lost me. My son lost me. I was separated from everyone that I love.
It was a day before Jason's birthday. I wanted to do him a little party. I went to the store with a friend of mine. She was like, oh, let's just take it.
A group of migrant women is coming forward with claims that they were the victims of unwanted and unnecessary medical procedures at a federal detention center in Georgia.
Surgeries were performed on several detainees without them fully understanding what was happening.
As a female, it feels like somebody just run you over and left you destroyed. That's how it feels, because it's something that they did to you and you have no idea. After surgery, I was bleeding every day. I was not getting no answers. I told my dad, I'm gonna sign the deportation. At least in Salvador, I can find a doctor that is going to help me and find out what's going on.
I was in Jamaica. Oh, man. I didn't know what to do.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and Border Safety. We'll now turn to Mr. Bailey, who's participating virtually. Mr. Bailey, please proceed with your testimony.
I have now been living in exile for 8 years. 10 years if I include the 2 I spent in immigration jail fighting my case. The last time I saw my home was 10 years ago. And since then, life feels like a total nightmare. Every day I hope that I would wake up and just be back home in Virginia again. And I remember going to the bathroom and looking in that mirror. I don't know who I was looking at. I'm just asking for a chance to come home to the country I love, the country I serve. The States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey, thank you.
When I come back to El Salvador, I was like, Dad, I'm not gonna make it. Like, my God, what am I doing here?
When my mom got deported, it changed a lot in my life. My mom was responsible for my medicine, taking me to the doctor. I was just lost. I was like 15, 16 years old, lost. Everything went downhill.
I remember where I was at. I was in the country. The signal, the phone signal was not even working that good. They told me like, ICE looked over your case and they decided to overturn your immigration case. Oh my God, man.
Mr. Bailey fought for our country, and I'm happy to fight for him.
And I saw Brandon. When I left here, Brandon was this high. I'm back in the trucking business. Everything start coming right back. It still feel good to be out there. You get your mind free. You focus on the road. Like therapy to me, I feel I needed this.
It's hard because I'm not there. I gotta hear him through the phone. I gotta see him, like his voice. He doesn't sound like my baby no more. He sounds like a man now. And it's hard that I'm missing those special moments that I should be there. I hope that I do get a chance to go back and spend as much as time I can with my kids, to be there with them, to see them grow up and do things right.
We're gonna have to wait and see what happens in court.
Man, I have to wait and see what happens. Hopefully everything goes good.
I'll be back there soon.
Okay. Deep breath. So we have Jesse and the policy team working on a daily basis, hourly basis, nights and weekends, days, to educate legislators, bring people back, review policies that are coming out and challenge them. We have people on our litigation team that are diving into all of the details and creatively, zealously thinking about how do we challenge these. We have people on the ground across the country that are coming up with programs, going out to shelters, going out to community-based organizations and meeting with these clients on a daily basis, getting their phone calls on a daily basis. And we have wonderful, also proactive campaigns that are fighting to make our immigration system better. We need your help. You are here in this room because you care, or you're online because you care. So we need your help. Here are a couple ideas of ways that you can get involved, right? Yes, advocacy is part of our mission. We are all members of the society because we are here or somehow connected to the here. Please call your members of Congress. Use your voice. This is still a democracy, some will say. Please use your voice and communicate to support your representatives in supporting the asylum ban. Please tell your members and your representatives to divest from enforcement and invest in communities. Please sign the petition that's found online to support a chance to come home. And if you're a pro bono attorney or at a law firm, reach out to us because we still need more people to represent these individuals that are abroad. On that note, And this is where I'm biased because I'm the pro bono manager, right? We have 96 cases on our case list. That does not even include the clients that we're seeing in clinics. If you have a law degree in the United States or are associated with a law firm and can help, please reach out. Even one case makes a huge difference, okay? If you are not a lawyer and you're interested in speaking another language, you know, we do have a language line. We do need language supporters, so interpreters, if you're fluent in another language plus English. And of course, you know, Lisa kind of drove this home. Obviously, we need funds to keep this work going. And so no amount is too small or too big. So there's a donate button. Please go ahead and donate and then stay informed, right? Stay in touch. We're happy to have this presentation now, and we'll have more coming up. If you are an attorney or in the legal community, we have a lot of fun events coming up in the fall, including a panel with immigration judges. We have trainings and we have a pro bono celebration, right? So stay informed. This is all on our website. Why don't you go to our next slide, please? The email addresses of our presenters are here if you have specific questions, including my email address if you're interested in taking a case or can take a case. And now I'm also going to turn it over to questions. So we have some, I don't know that we have any questions online, but if you have questions online, please drop them in the chat or drop them in the Q&A. What other questions do we have here in the room? Anybody? Any curiosities? We just covered a lot of material. Yeah, Chad.
Thank you very much for all of this and for all the work that you all are doing. It's just really incredible and very moving. I'm curious from the view from DC, how receptive do you think legislators are to arguments right now? I know there's a lot of attention in different ways, going in different directions, just getting them to focus on this and to pay attention to the points that you're advocating for. Can you talk about recent inroads or responsiveness generally from our legislators?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can start and let Nina jump in more, because I do think it is great to focus on some of these positive areas, like what Nina's working on, where there are some members of Congress, like Senator Padilla there, you know, who is really fighting on this specific issue, and you know, those members really make a big difference. And so, but overall, it is a difficult climate. It's a really very challenging climate with the election coming up next year. You know, it becomes such an election issue and such a kind of talking points issue, and a lot of congressional hearings, particularly in the House, are very just quite awful in the anti-immigrant rhetoric that's really used, the criminalizing rhetoric that's used. There's a lot of work on that side, you know, just to educate members of Congress who do push back against that and do actually push for, you know, sound and humane and just solutions. And there are some, there's a cohort of, you know, newer members of Congress that came in this last Congress, that are actually, you know, quite strong in advocating for just and humane policies and programs. So there is some hope there, but overall it is a very challenging climate, and it's a lot of work to get members of Congress to really listen to these issues, and particularly when there is always kind of the next election cycle. It's, you know, it's always a task to get, you know, Hill offices to really, you know, focus on the policies and more than the politics, because it becomes very tricky. Additional pieces Nina might have.
No, I think Jesse described it perfectly. I would just say two things. One is that, you know, he's right. We're in an incredibly politicized moment on immigration, and the right has done a really effective job of politicizing our communities and using them as political weapons. But two things. One is that there are small drops in the bucket that do matter. And so one example of that is the advocacy we do through the appropriations process in Congress, and how, you know, federal dollars are used by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice. That advocacy can have a significant impact in, you know, small, tangible ways, even in a moment like this. And then I think more broadly, you know, something like Chance to Come Home and the work our communications team does, because we're up against this narrative on the right. I do think we have an obligation, even as attorneys and direct service providers and litigators, to bring along broader segments of the public on behalf of our communities. We represent politically powerless people, and to get people like Senator Padilla, even Senator Booker, but then some of our more moderate senators on the Democratic side to care about our communities, we have to get everyday people to have empathy and care. And so I think we are doing a really amazing job at NIJC at trying to balance all of these pieces in this moment we're in. So, it's dire in DC some days, but I think we retain hope because of some of these other pieces. So,
and one more piece that, I mean, some of the Chicago area representatives, are very responsive and often some of the biggest champions on these issues. And so, there's a constant, kind of stream of requests that we have for them, and they're very responsive when people are in detention, they'll react. So, I mean, Congresswoman Chakowski, Congressman Joey Garcia, Delia Ramirez, who's a newer member of Congress. These are, some of the champions that are always willing to really go to bat and fight on these issues. So that is something.
Question around the EAD. So from the slide, it said that once you apply for asylum, you have to wait 150 days to then apply for an employment document. What's the standard wait to get that document? I would imagine that when people come here, securing employment and providing for their families and being members of the community are really important. And then once you get the EAD, how long do you have it? Like, what's the reality of that situation?
Yeah, so some of our new arrivals come in with parole, which often can allow them to apply for EADs,
Which are work permits?
yeah, work permits, right when they come in, but often that parole is a really, really short time. And so by the time they actually get their work permit, it's effectively useless. So in this process where you apply for asylum and then you wait 150 days to apply, USCIS is supposed to adjudicate and make a decision on the work permit within 30 days of that initial application. Renewals are a different story. Also an issue, but they're supposed to give you a decision in 30 days. At least in my experience, and my colleagues too here can probably speak to that. It's been longer. I think I'm not sure what the average is right now, but definitely longer than a month.
I'd say 2 to 3 months
2 to
for
3
the first time.
Yes. So yeah, let's say 150 days, then 2 to 3 months, then you get your let's say you get your work permit. Chances are your social security card and your work permit did not come at the same time. We have many issues with social security cards getting lost in the ether. And so then we have to send our clients to social security offices to request that often non-English speakers to social security office to request the social security card. Many issues can come up there, but then 2 weeks later, they'll have it mailed to their house. As you can see, this can be, and this is really common, and my colleague has a lot of experience with the social security and EAD work permit aspect of it all, but our opinion is always too slow. And it's always the promises that are made are not followed up on and not actually acted on.
We do hear a lot of, and like for the new arrivals, one of their primary concerns is when can I start working, right? And this is an extremely unfortunate additional delay for these individuals, right? That are trying to find stability and dignity here in the States. We have a question online right now also, and I think this can go both direct services and to policy. From Leanne. Leanne's asking, what efforts are we making, or what can we do to address family separation at the border? So some of the families, the grandparents, siblings, cousins that are separated from children that are paroled into the United States. Does anybody have any thoughts on what is going on at the border right now?
Yeah, and maybe Colleen can weigh in more, it's all the work. So, since the Biden administration, they came in and developed a task force on family reunification through an executive order, which was a really, big measure that is focused a lot on reunifying families who were separated under the Trump administration. But still, as a result of the policies that are still been ongoing, that are really centered on, more enforcement-based approach, there has been ongoing separation that occur when people arrive. They occur in some instances because of the foreign data sharing programs that we discussed. They occur because people are accused of, something in their past, something criminal on their background. They're still ongoing. We had a recent case, maybe I can let Colleen speak more about some of the cases, but there's a lot of advocacy still ongoing to restrict the ways in which they can carry out separations, and a lot of that is pushing back against these so-called deterrence measures that they are carrying out. So advocacy against the use of criminal prosecutions and against the use of expedited removal, and the asylum ban itself is these type of restrictions are causing a lot of family separations in instances where people are sending their children over because they're not able to get enter, or they get an appointment, and families separate that way because some get an appointment, some don't. So pushing back on that is a really big way to push back against family separations.
I could add two things. One, when we see the separation between a minor child and a biological parent, often it's due to baseless criminal allegations. When that happens to a parent, there is no system in which that they can combat that or challenge that. There's no transparency, and often it's happening when people don't have attorneys, and even when they do have attorneys with great connections and on all sorts of levels, it can still take months and months to reunify people. And then the other thing to the person's question is the definition of for family separation. If you come in with an uncle, a grandparent, that's not considered a family unit. It's only if it's a biological parents, or you have official paperwork with you in hand to show the adoption, which is super rare. So that is something that on a definitional level would need to change within the administration, to the extent that I understand.
So we are at time. We have one question left, so I'm going to ask it. If people need to leave, we understand that. And for those that are dropping off online, thank you. But we'll just keep this Q&A going with this one extra question here from Sebastian, and it's asking if NIJC does work with unaccompanied minors, and if you could briefly describe what that would be. Go ahead.
Our colleague Azadeh Irfani does a lot of work focusing on unaccompanied minors and focusing on policies related to the ORR facilities, Office of Refugees and Resettlement Facilities. So that would be a point of contact, I think, to reach out for more. But yes, a lot of work around supporting unaccompanied minors.
Yeah, so I think it goes across all of our programs, right? So Azadeh is on our policy team and is digging in a lot to the policies involving unaccompanied immigrant children. We also have a direct legal services team, two of them, if you want to be technical, that work with unaccompanied immigrants. So we provide direct legal services to immigrant children that are in shelters in the Chicagoland area, and then we also represent post-release so that they can continue with their immigration cases. So one of our, for example, our pro bono programs is working with children who may be eligible for special immigrant juvenile status, and we provide representation in the family court so that they can pursue their immigration relief. And of course, we have children on our list right now for pro bono cases, looking to represent children with families as well. So there's a lot of immigrant children involved in our cases. Sebastian, I hope that covers your question, and we're always happy to talk more. Any other questions in the room or online?
have one last question. I really enjoyed the chance to come home, and I'm wondering if we will be able to get updates on the 10 individuals that you featured.
Yeah, you mean updates right now or just? Yeah, no, I mean, so the idea of a campaign like this is precisely that. It is to try to involve many more people in the fight to bring these 10 people back, which we envision including updates on what's happening with that fight. And so, you know, we are engaging directly with the administration on this policy ask, but also on these 10 individual cases. So, you know, they are courageously advocating on behalf, you know, for many people. And so at NIJC, you know, it's our responsibility to advocate for them alongside their individual legal teams. And my hope is that there, you know, at least 2 or 3 with particularly ripe legal hooks that we think are getting enough support thanks to the campaign and some key members of Congress. So, you know, I hope that before the holidays, at least 1 or 2 of them will be able to bring back. But yes, and we have, I should say, now that you brought it up, Trisha, that we have, you know, a beautiful NIJC campaign page, thanks to our communications team, that tell, you know, where each of these 10 people provides their own testimonial, that you'll see photos of their family, the legal asks that they're making. You can sign our petition. You can read all the news we're generating on this, you know, see which members of Congress are championing. And that's where, you know, we will post updates, and you won't miss it if we bring somebody back, right? That we all need that sort of hope and inspiration in this work and movement. And so I promise we will amplify that when we have those big ones.
And one example recently, if you missed it, is that Howard Bailey, who Nina has worked with for years now, a couple of years, and was critical in this case, became a U.S. citizen just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so not only brought him back, reunited him with his family, met him at the airport, but also became a U.S. citizen. And now is going to vote with us also. So we're super excited for Howard and grateful for this campaign.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get back to work. Let's call our members of Congress. Okay. We're going to cut it off here. Thank you guys.
Thank you.